Wes Anderson is a very famous director, like a lot, people know about Wes Anderson. He's Wes Anderson. His aesthetic is constantly copied and evoked to communicate various things. AI recently has been doing a lot of Wes Anderson stuff badly. It basically just does the Grand Budapest Hotel and nothing else. It doesn't even do that right, so... there's this idea that Wes Anderson films all tend to be exactly the same, or that they all tend to be very style over substance. And I think that's basically an unfair thing to say. And I actually think they're similar in not visual ways, but in thematic ways. I think he has a lot of kind of shared theming going on in his movies that is very interesting. Some are a lot about death or family. Often they're about someone writing a little play or maybe a movie. So, I would have considered myself a fan of Wes Anderson for a long time, but recently I went through and I watched everything he's ever done. I watched all of his short films, I watched all of his feature-length movies, I watched from Bottle Rocket 1993 to Phoenician Scheme, which came out last year, and I just kept track of all of the interesting things, all of the details, all of the trends within his filmography. And I think that's why I'm making this video, to share this with you, because I think there is something in Wes Anderson. I think his films have gotten worse in the past few years, and I think it's not for the reasons that people maybe think. But there's something in there, right? Like, did Wes Anderson fall off? Has he fallen off? Will he come back? Are his famously good films his best ones, or is there hidden gems? Are there films that everyone thinks are bad that are secretly great? So this is like an intro segment, and then I'm just gonna talk about every film that he made, and what I think about it, and who made it, and then at the end we'll see how we all feel about how that's happened. Any Wes-rospective has to also kind of be an Owen Wilson-rospective. That one doesn't work as well. Owen Wilson and Wes Anderson met in college, right? Like, they were best friends. All of Wes Anderson's early films are written also by Owen Wilson. So, for his first part, we were also talking about him, to be clear. That's literally his boy. That's his guy. His best buddy. The first one was the short film, the black and white short film Bottle Rocket, which is fine, fundamentally. Bottle Rocket 93 is, basically the only actually normal film Wes Anderson ever made. There's a lot of his early work that people would call, like, normal films in comparison to his later, more stylized stuff, but Bottle Rocket 93 is the only one that feels like it could have been made basically by anyone. The film is okay, but it's basically entirely incomprehensible. I don't mean like it's difficult to interpret, but that I literally don't know what they're saying most of the time, because you can't really hear them.
Give me the fucking gun. Indignant, relax. It's not your gun, okay? Fuck you too, Bob. Assholes, bastards, cowards.
The sound mixing isn't done very well, and also everyone's always just talking over each other, so, it's basically impossible to understand what's going on at any given moment. And that's all I have to say about that. Three years later, in 1996, Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson made a full-length Bottle Rocket. It's called Bottle Rocket still. This one is in color and is longer, and it's slightly easier to understand, but also still not very easy to understand. Again, people are still talking over each other. The sound mixing hasn't improved much. People are slamming things around in the car park that I'm filming this by. It's also kind of paced terribly. I don't know if it's really paced terribly or if it just feels slow. The whole start bit is them sort of doing this heist, and then the whole middle section, they're just at this hotel, and then it just sort of, meanders onwards. So I guess a lot of films are paced like that, and I don't mind those. It's difficult for a film to be paced like that, and also you don't really understand what anyone's saying at any point. A lot of people would say Bottle Rocket is like a normal film, that it's not sort of in a Wes Anderson style, but I would completely disagree. I think it does look very Anderson-y. You know, it's not necessarily the symmetrical shots, but he's never really had symmetrical shots. It's just, they're not even flat. They're not even really flat shots, but they're just very sort of meticulously blocked is the thing. In Bottle Rocket, I mean, it's a less extreme version of that, but it's certainly already leaning into that kind of style. There's also kind of this recurring thing with especially his collaborations with Owen Wilson or, either of the Wilson brothers, where they tend to have themes of, suicide and kind of mental illness. Owen Wilson's character in this film starts off in like a psychiatric hospital, and then he gets out and goes and does, this heist thing he's doing. And it's sort of under-remarked upon. I mean, they obviously show it at the start, but they don't mention it onward, though there is kind of an inherent melancholy to the film. He seems like a sad guy. It's kind of a weird opening style for Wes Anderson, sort of something he'd never do again, and that it's, Bottle Rocket is kind of neo-noir-y in the way of, like, The Big Lebowski is neo-noir-y. It's kind of a weird and violent film, and James Caan is in it, and I don't know how... Something interesting about Bottle Rocket is that 1996, it came out the same year as Hard 8, which was Paul Thomas Anderson's first film. And they must have both been in, mid to late 20s. I think PTA was in his early 20s. And they have these films, which are quite, amateurish. They're clearly debut films. I mean, they're excellent for debut feature films, but still. But they have these great actors that, PTA, he has Philip Baker Hall and Wes Anderson as James Caan, and I just think, I'm 22. If I had James Caan, I could make a film as good as Bottle Rocket easily. I think I could make... Well, it's probably the only Wes Anderson film I think I could make a film apart with, but I could. I'm telling you, I could, if you gave me James Caan. He's dead, but another actor on his level. If you gave me... Do we have old character actors anymore? Why is the only name I can think of Jay McCarroll? I find it hard to say if I like Bottle Rocket. I kind of don't think of it as a film that you could like or dislike. It's just a film that exists. It's a film that's around, and I watched it, and I appreciate some elements of it, but it doesn't... There's not much emotional core to it that I think resonates, with me at least. Maybe other people are different, but frankly, no one talks about Bottle Rocket. It's one of the few that I think actually most people haven't seen. But I've seen it. And I don't think you have to watch it. This is a blazer I had when I was a teenager, which is obviously, like, fitting, given we're talking about Rushmore, but oh my god, the way this thing is ill-fitting. So Rushmore was obviously co-written by Owen Wilson, as for all of these early films. A fun story I think about Rushmore is how Wes Anderson came to cast Jason Schwartzman in the role. And the story that I've heard is that Wes Anderson was at a party and the Coppolas happened to be there, and he was describing his film to Sofia Coppola, and he said, well, it's about like a precocious teen boy who's in love with his teacher. And she said, well, that sounds like my cousin, Jason. And then she pointed across the room to Jason Schwartzman, who was wearing a three-piece tuxedo and top hat and was flirting with his mother's friends. And the thing about that story is that it's not completely true. It was actually the casting director, not Wes Anderson, who was at that party, and Jason Schwartzman wasn't flirting with his mother's friends at 17, but he was in love with his babysitter growing up, so that's not as fun of a story, but it happened. This is the first film that I think the average person would really recognize as having Wes Anderson's style, There's a lot of the fisheye lens. He really loves the fisheye lens in these older films. He came into movies and he was like, there's one thing I like, it's a fisheye lens. He was big on it. There's also a whole kind of metatextual element with Jason Schwartzman's character Max is writing a play the whole movie. And then the end of the film is the premiere of his play. But it's kind of a story within a story thing, which is a common theme among Wes Anderson films. I mean, probably more than half of them have a kind of story within their own story, or they have a narrator or something, in that regard. And this one is about a kid who's writing a play. And we don't see the play, but we see pieces, and it seems very involved. There's a whole war segment. I mean, it's complex as play. He's in there. I really like this movie. I think it's a good film about sort of an evil kid in the way that, Licorice Pizza or, the film Margaret, they're both films about, like, evil kind of children. And I don't mean, he's evil in the way that kids are evil. Like, you're a kid and you don't know how the world works and you're just gonna be a precocious little fuck. But that's okay. It's fine to be an evil teen. And I guess that's mostly what I have to say. It scares me when I see Brian Cox in this film because I never expect him to be there. And then he is, and I'm like, whoa, what are you doing here? What I have to say is that it's the first Wes Anderson film that feels like a movie that's real. And it could be a Kieran Culkin film, is basically what I want to tell you. I want to just say Kieran Culkin could have been in this. He wasn't, but it's in his oeuvre. The Royal Tenenbaums is the last movie that Owen Wilson and Wes Anderson ever wrote together. The first thing I want to say is that the title of this film is basically nonsensical. I mean, this is some Good Will Hunting shit. The thing is, there's a character called Royal Tenenbaum. But this is the Royal Tenenbaums. They're not royals. This very much continues kind of the suicidal theming around Owen Wilson characters, though this time it's actually Luke Wilson, his brother. And his whole character arc is that he's depressed because he's in love with his adoptive sister, and they can't be together for obvious reasons. And so then towards the end of the film, he tries to kill himself. There's a lead up to him killing himself for sure, but you are kind of thinking, this is a bit far, buddy. Like, you clearly have some other things going on here, and that's why you're doing it. And I find that interesting from a character perspective. Owen Wilson isn't in the film much, but when he is in the film, he's playing Luke Wilson's best friend. And they used to do all their stuff together, and they were like best buddies. They were around each other all the time, and then they kind of both got too famous in the wrong directions, and then they stopped being able to work together, and now they're sort of estranged. Which is really interesting when you consider this is the last movie Owen Wilson and Wes Anderson ever wrote together. Like, that's what happened to them, kind of. I mean, they were best friends, they did everything together, and then they've just stopped being able to make the scheduling work. And there's a very melancholy sort of preemptive feeling to that kind of character arc, where they probably know this is the last time they're going to get to do this. And that's fascinating, right? Gwyneth Paltrow's in this film. She's excellent. She plays the adoptive sister. Gwyneth Paltrow is so good in some movies that you just feel like, what is happening right now? Like this and Talented Mr. Ripley, she had a great, like, 90s run. I mean, this is 2001, but she had, like, a great, like, late 90s, early 2000s. Like, she was just in the most, like, peaked films, and she was so good in all of them. And you're just thinking, Gwyneth, never let this go. Gwyneth, if I was you, I would never be an Iron Man, or do Goop, or have like a younger, more liberal boyfriend who tells me I'm a Republican. I wouldn't do any of that if I was her. I would just be in good movies forever. Wes Anderson is also kind of leaning into this sort of Noah Baumbach-y style that he has, and we'll talk about Noah Baumbach more later. But his films are kind of becoming these sort of wider family dramas. This is very much his first sort of big ensemble piece. Like, a lot of his films were individual characters up until now, and now we have, this big cast of people, and it's sort of about all of them and how they relate to one another, though there are kind of mainer characters within that. But it's dealing with ideas of, like, morality and redemption and having a difficult family, or like a difficult father specifically, he likes to talk about a lot. And kind of the idea of, like, dealing with death and yourself dying and your loved ones dying. I mean, Ben Stiller's character, his whole thing is that, his wife died in sudden circumstances, and that kind of just overwhelms his life from now on. I mean, he literally can't function like he used to because of that. And the film is sort of about him trying to overcome that, trying to realize, well, death is all around us, and it will come for us all one day, but You literally just have to move forward. There's nothing you can do. You have to just keep going through it. You just have to live through your pain. There is no easy answer. You can't just avoid it. You have to live in it. And that's a really interesting idea that sort of permeates throughout his filmography in this interesting way. I like this one a lot. This is another very fisheye lensy one. He loves the fisheye lens in the Tenenbaums. But I like that. I like that kind of style for him. It's very focused on sort of set and props, and it's this kind of grand New York estate. And it feels like a very New York movie in the way that a lot of his films kind of have one distinctive vibe that he often doesn't repeat. It's almost similar to Succession. It's like if in Succession they were old money, it would be Tenenbaums vibes. I love it. I think it's great. I think this is his first really good movie. I like Rushmore, but this is his first movie where you're like, okay, this is what our greatest guy, one of our greatest guys. Right here, it's Mr. Wesley Anderson. Wesley Wales Anderson. His middle name is Wales. Like the country Wales. That's his name. He's called Wales. So... The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou was co-written by none other than Noah Baumbach. Noah Baumbach is a famous sort of writer-director. He made Marriage Story, he made Frances Ha, he made the Meyerowitz stories, he made White Noise, he made Jay Kelly. I know you love Jay Kelly. The point is Noah Baumbach is a big guy for like sort of existential character pieces, you know. He makes a lot of films about divorce. Steve Zissou, I was going to say isn't about divorce, but it's a bit about divorce. There's some divorce theming. Bill Murray's character is married to Angelica Houston, but she is cheating on him with Jeff Goldblum, who's bisexual. So, you know, this is the first sort of big stylistic jump in Wes Anderson films. Like this one, we're getting into it now. You know, there's little stop-motion creatures. There's these big elaborate sets. There's like a Brazilian musician who's just playing David Bowie covers all through the movie, and that's kind of sick. There's also more sort of Owen Wilson suicide theming. In this film, he is fine, but his mother committed suicide. And he's Steve Zissou, sleeps with woman, has son, maybe. It's Owen Wilson, but we don't know. Angelica Houston seems to think that Bill Murray couldn't have children biologically, so then it's unclear, but he treats him as if he's a son. A lot of this film is actually about kind of, is he a good father? What is it to be a good father? I mean, he's not a good father. I guess they're not asking the question. They're just being like, look at this terrible father, and what do we do about him? This is also very much like a story within a story film. You know, the film opens at the film premiere of one of Steve Zissou's documentaries. And the whole process of the film is we're watching them make a documentary, and then the end of the film ends with another film premiere. So the whole thing does surround the concept of filmmaking and of, you know, creating art about your own life, I suppose. One of Noah Baumbach's early films, The Squid and the Whale, kind of maybe his first real mainstream hit. It wasn't a hit. I mean, it's a depressing movie about a divorcing couple and their two sons. And the dad is really evil, though. Wes Anderson produced that film when it came out the year after this in 2005. See, that's interesting because this is an aquatic movie with divorce themes, and Squid and the Whale is a divorce movie with aquatic themes. Rewatching this, there's a lot of action in this movie. It's sort of an action film in a way. And this Phoenician Scheme was kind of, people said like, oh, this is Wes Anderson doing like an action-adventure movie, but this is very much an action-adventure film. There's like a whole shootout scene. There's sort of actually two whole shootout scenes. There's like chases. It's a very action-heavy movie in a way you wouldn't expect going in, because it's also a kind of slow existential mulling on the nature of death. I mean, easily the best part of this movie is that the whole thing is about Steve Zissou, who is this sort of documentary filmmaker. He does like adventure sea movies. He's going off to find the jaguar shark, which is a big, huge, evil shark that killed his best friend Esteban. His son also dies in the water, but not to the jaguar shark. But after that, they finally track down this jaguar shark, and they all get in this little submarine, and they go, and they face it, and it's this big, beautiful thing, obviously representative of the nature of death, that, you know, people can just be taken from you by like a bigger, more powerful force that's incomprehensible and also doesn't really know who you are. You know, Steve Zissou looks at it, and the only thing he says is
I wonder if it remembers me.
and then he just starts sobbing. And I find that one of the most powerful moments in cinema. I think about it all the time. I just find it so interesting that that's, you know, he wants to know if it remembers him. He doesn't want to get revenge. I mean, he's going on the mission initially to get revenge for his, you know, his fallen friend. But when he's facing it, he doesn't care about revenge. He just wants to know if it cares about him, if anything it did was intentional. And that's so sort of haunting and interesting, right? I mean, it's so evocative and upsetting, the idea that he's asking, does it remember me? He wonders if it remembers him. I think there's kind of, the fact that the film is so miserable and depressing, it gets away with that because it has this veneer of like a fun, silly action-adventure romp. It's kind of like BoJack Horseman in that way. You know, that show gets away with being so sort of truthful in its depiction of mental health and of sadness because it's not people doing it. It's like animated things. In this film, it is people, but they're on these big elaborate sets. You know, there's this whole long tracking shot through the set of the ship, clearly showing like the carpentry, like even the background behind them as they walk through having this argument. And it's a kind of depth you can only get into when you have an acknowledgement of like, and this isn't real. And this is all just a story that we're telling ourselves. And it's about storytellers, the film. And a lot of Wes Anderson films do that. I mean, they're a lot about storytelling as a concept and, you know, how art relates to grief. And I'll get back to that when we talk about Asteroid City. But that all kind of starts here. I think this is Wes Anderson's first really excellent movie. The Darjeeling Limited and Hotel Chevalier is two movies, technically. One short film that's intended to be played before the main feature. These movies were co-written by Wes Anderson, Jason Schwartzman, and Roman Coppola. This is obviously his first film written with Roman Coppola. He's going to be a main feature from now on, kind of. After this film, if he's writing with someone, it's usually Roman Coppola. Roman Coppola is the son of Francis Ford Coppola, brother to Sofia Coppola, cousin of Jason Schwartzman, who is a Coppola. Fun fact. The film was written with these three guys while they were on a train in India, which is the plot of the movie, is that three brothers are on a train in India. So, you know, you can see the connection there. They're on a train in India writing a movie about some brothers. Two of them are cousins. One of them is just like a family friend. Hotel Chevalier is sort of a weird short. I don't think it sets the tone for the movie. The plot of Hotel Chevalier is the plot of the short story that Jason Schwartzman in the movie is writing. So in Darjeeling, Jason Schwartzman's character is writing a story about this hotel trip he went on with his then girlfriend, who's quite abusive to him. So Hotel Chevalier is just like a filmed interpretation of this story. And it is unnecessary, you know, it's sort of, watching it before the film, you comment and you're just like, oh, the story he's talking about is this, but I've already seen it, and then there's no kind of intrigue to what happened there. It removes actually a layer of interest in the movie, and it's also just tonally pretty unfitting, though it is nice to see Jason Schwartzman. But I'm not a big fan of Hotel Chevalier, though I am a huge fan of the Darjeeling Limited. This is the last time Wes Anderson really worked closely with Owen Wilson. I mean, he has guest roles in some other films, and he did, you know, voiceover work for Fantastic Mr. Fox and Isle of Dogs. I think he did voiceover work for Isle of Dogs. He didn't do voiceover work on Isle of Dogs. Whoa, dude, what the fuck? You could have got him in for that, buddy. He has some features in other films, but they're more cameo appearances. This is the last, like, long feature film they did. Feels like in with collaboration with each other, even though this wasn't written by Owen Wilson. Fittingly, there is, of course, suicide theming within this. Owen Wilson's character is injured the whole movie from a motorcycle accident, and it's revealed towards the end that it was actually intentional. That was a suicide attempt. And it's interesting because Owen Wilson had his own suicide attempt shortly after filming this film. He was he didn't have to do the press tour really because he was recovering from his suicide attempt. So, you know, with that context, I think you can kind of see the place that this theming comes from within their movies together. Like, that's obviously something that Owen Wilson has struggled with, and so that's something that he brings to his art in this way. So I haven't mentioned him up until now, but every Wes Anderson film before this one was composed by a man called Mark Mothersbaugh. Mark Mothersbaugh. Mark Mothersbaugh. He composed the music for all of Wes Anderson's films, and then in this one, there's actually no written score. All of the score is score from other Indian films, and then there's some needle drops, which are mostly the Kinks songs. Mark Mothersbaugh hasn't composed a film after this for Wes Anderson. It's just he did his first films, and then he stopped working with him here, and then they don't work together again. So we've done the last one, the last Mark Mothersbaugh. The film itself is, well, literally the most perfect movie in the world. It just captures like a sibling dynamic in such a wonderful way. Especially with Owen Wilson's character, he has the kind of older sibling energy that he brings. There's like a whole scene at the start where he orders all of their food for them in the restaurant, and then towards the end of the film they meet up with their kind of estranged mother, and she orders all of their food for them, and you think like, oh, that's where he gets it from. And there's good moments, like Owen Wilson is trying to give Adrian Brody his belt, and he kind of says, this is from Jack and me, his younger brother, who hasn't contributed. I mean, it's obviously not from Jack, but it is the thing you say when you're three siblings and one of you gives something to someone else as a gift. You say, well, this is from both of us, no matter if it's from the other one. I think I'm biased towards this movie because I am one of three siblings, and I think my sibling dynamic is in many ways, I mean, it doesn't map at all. I have two older sisters, but there are elements to which this dynamic feels relevant to my own life. So I think I watch it and I think that's me in there. If you're not a sibling, it's not the same. Probably if you're not one of three siblings, it's not the same. And also if you're not sort of a strange neurotic guy, it's not as good. It's a film for me. I love it because it's about myself. And other people maybe wouldn't think the same way. There is a commonly leveled criticism of this film that it treats India and Indian people as sort of props. And I think this is a reasonable criticism to level at Wes Anderson, but maybe not for this film specifically. I think there are a lot of moments where the Indian characters are given their own interiority. Rita has a whole kind of story clearly going on in amongst this when, a young Indian boy dies. That dies, kind of, the brothers save two of his brothers, but he dies. It's not just, you're not just watching the main white characters mourn this kid. There's also scenes of, the kid's father and his brother. They're also clearly mourning as well. And I think that's sort of what you need. And it feels like the plot of the film is that it's these three guys trying to do like a kind of eat, pray, love thing, trying to use India as a prop in their own healing. But that's not what helps them. Like, they're literally putting their baggage on the people in the country of India when really they need to just let go of it. But you can't just put all of your issues onto a whole nation. You need to own it and to take responsibility for freeing yourself of it. And so I guess what I'm saying is the movie wouldn't work the themes of the film wouldn't work any other way. And you can take issue with that that's what the film is, but it's what the film is. Like, I don't think you could make that story any better. And I think they do actually show a lot of interiority to Indian people within the film. But I'm a white guy, so I guess I actually think it's like a fun movie. It's just like fun that they're just, going on these sort of strange existential trips, and Owen Wilson has like an assistant, and he says at the start, like, you're never gonna see him, and then you see him a bunch, and then he gets fired because Owen Wilson's super mean to him. And it's so I mean, it's corny and like on the nose. There's a part where Owen Wilson takes all the bandages off his face, and it's quite slow, the scene, and quite meticulous. And he looks at himself in the mirror and he says,
I guess I've still got some more healing to do.
like, it's so on the nose, but I like it a lot. It makes me happy. It makes me smile to see this. It's so perfect. I don't know what else I could say. It's the best film of all time, and there's nothing else that needs to be said. It's a perfect movie. 200 stars from me. Fantastic Mr. Fox is Wes Anderson's second film that he co-wrote with Noah Baumbach. The other one they wrote together was obviously Steve Zissou, so he kind of took a one-film break and then, back to his boy Noah. You can tell this is a Noah Baumbach film because it's so much about divorce. Fantastic Mr. Fox is also the first Wes Anderson film that was scored by Alexander Desplat, who scores every film that he has from now on. The thing with this film is that it's, sort of seen as a kid's movie. I mean, Fantastic Mr. Fox, the books, are kids' books. And the film was rated U, so, it is family-friendly, but I don't think it's a film that kids are getting much out of. I remember seeing this at the cinema when I was a kid. I must have been 5 years old. I saw this at the cinema. And I remember it's not that I disliked it, I just felt like I didn't get it. I didn't understand anything that it was about. I mean, there's like a whole scene where he meets with like a real estate lawyer. So I don't think kids understand that. I mean, I didn't know what a real estate lawyer was when I was 5. It's kind of a story about class mobility, he's like this working class guy. He lives in a burrow. He would like to live in a tree. But that kind of class mobility doesn't exist in this world, so he has to turn to a life of thievery. He has to turn to dishonest means in order to get this class mobility. Because he wants to provide for his family. He has this sort of patriarchal need to be the provider. This is what I mean. You're not picking up any of that as a kid. You're just seeing foxes and thinking, this looks nice. There's also, talking about the film being about divorce, there's a whole scene where Mrs. Fox says to him,
I love you too. But I shouldn't have married you.
and it's really, there's a really sort of in-depth emotional core to the family life in this movie that feels very much like a Noah Baumbach movie. You could essentially mistake this for something like The Squid and the Whale or the Meyerowitz stories. It's a family kitchen sink drama which just so happens to be about animated foxes. Obviously, we know now with our present knowledge that Wes Anderson does have this sort of a, interest in Roald Dahl as a figure. He's adapted now several of his short stories as well as this film. And I've never understood it. I'm not a huge fan of Roald Dahl. And I think the Roald Dahl-isms are the worst part of this movie. The whole, sort of twee little rhyme like, oh, Boris Bunsen Bean. And I just find it corny. I just don't like it at all. And it's kind of, I think it's almost a perfect film. I don't like those aspects because I'm not a Roald Dahl fan, and I'm curious why Wes Anderson likes him so much. I guess he sort of likes that twee thing, but it feels like he's often not doing twee, he's doing, quite embellished. He's doing quite embellished stuff, and he often leans on sort of sentimentality, but I guess, people accuse Wes Anderson of having this kind of cute twee veneer that I don't think exists in as many of his films as people would say. But certainly some beginning of that exists in this movie. And that's the part I don't like about it. But it is basically a perfect, I would give it 5 stars on anything. It also has kind of this sick ending, about like, You may be forced out of your home by the establishment, you may be, you know, an oppressed underclass, but in the end you can still dance. Just being alive is defying. I mean, they don't really get back to their home at the end, they just live in the sewers now, is how the film ends. They live in the sewers, but, you know, they continue to exist, they continue to live, and as an oppressed class, just living is an act of active defiance against oppressors. And that's kind of also the story, the message of Jojo Rabbit, which is another film I like. Moonrise Kingdom was the last film Wes Anderson ever co-wrote with someone, and he co-wrote it with our old buddy Roman Coppola. This is another kind of coming-of-age film, and also kind of another divorce movie. There are certainly divorce themes. There's another sort of parents who love each other but aren't maybe a good team together, and certainly are not a good team for their children. In a way, Jason Schwartzman in Wes Anderson films always kind of plays these like precocious children struggling to find their place in a world that is very much against people like them. I mean, that's like his character in Fantastic Mr. Fox, Rushmore, the other film I just mentioned. And again in this, well, actually this one isn't Jason Schwartzman, this is another kid, but he looks quite like Jason Schwartzman, and Jason Schwartzman is in the film later, so... Before I talk about Moonrise Kingdom itself, though, we should talk about the two associated short movies. The first being Cousin Ben's Troop Screening, which is a short film where Jason Schwartzman's character, Cousin Ben, holds a little screening for the movie Moonrise Kingdom for his scout troops. I mean, it's very short. It's maybe 3 minutes at most, but, you know, it's just a good time. I mean, it sets you up for the movie. I think, you know, you were to play this before the film, you would go in and you would feel like, yeah, it's time now for Moonrise Kingdom. We're in the vibes. The vibes? They're here. The other short film produced in association with Moonrise Kingdom was Do You Like to Read, which is a short film where the narrator of the movie just tells you about some books that one of the main characters, Susie, likes to read. This is another good short because it kind of gives some context behind, you know, sort of gives some more character depth to Susie. It introduces us to the idea that Susie is a person who exists. And it also introduces us to the narrator of the film. You know, a very important and very interesting character because, you know, why is there a narrator? And there is a narrator. In the whole film, there's this guy and he wears like this neat little blue jacket and a little red hat. He looks like he's in Steve Zissou. But he's not a character who exists in the world. There are a lot of Wes Anderson films that have this kind of meta element of like someone is telling a story or is writing a story that is the story you're watching. But he's just a guy who's telling it to us, the audience. He doesn't exist within the context of the film, though he sort of shares the environments with characters. I find him a fascinating figure. He's never explained, but I find it neat that he's there. There is a kind of a melancholy to this film. There's a melancholy to every Wes Anderson movie. I can stop saying that about all of them, but, you know, it's sad in the way that being a kid is sad. You know, and you're kind of a preteen and you sort of realize that things just might not work out for you. That stuff can be taken away, you know, there's loss in the world. There's difficult things, and you're just like a precocious preteen, and you're trying to fall in love and go and live in Moonrise Kingdom, but you can't. At the end of the movie, Moonrise Kingdom, the inlet that they find, that they love the little inlet, it's destroyed by a big storm. And they don't have it anymore, but at the end of the film, you know, Sam, the main character, is painting it in the attic. And it's, you know, it's beautiful in a way, this idea of, you know, great loss. And it's, again, it's like, you know, with Steve Zissou, it happens in Fantastic Mr. Fox as well. I didn't mention this earlier. There's a whole part with a wolf that they see. That's sort of a representative of something bigger than yourself. Something bigger and scarier and more powerful. And that's the storm in this movie, the bigger, scarier, more powerful thing. And it takes things from you, you know, it takes the inlet from them. It almost kills them. And that's just life, isn't it? There's forces and they just take things from you. That's really the message of the film for me. I mean, you can have your own interpretation. It's also just a fun romp. It's kind of like a road trip movie. Except they're just wandering. Like Hunt for the Wilder People-ish. Could you call it a road trip movie? I don't know. It's people wandering from place to place. And they do fun things and they, you know, have fun adventures along the way. And then amongst that, there's a deep sadness. And that's really the intriguing heart of the film. Is this film underrated? I said that in my notes. I said it's an underrated movie. But is it? I think all Wes Anderson films other than The Grand Budapest Hotel are inherently underrated because we don't talk about them enough. We should talk about them all of the time. There's a really great scene where it's Bill Murray and Frances McDormand, another awesome guy. They play Susie's parents, and there's a scene where, they're in bed and he's saying like,
I hope the roof flies off and I get sucked up into space. You'll be better off without me.
Stop feeling sorry for yourself.
Why?
We're all they've got, Walt.
It's not enough.
the scene just kind of just ends. There's no resolution to that. I guess the thing that's good about Wes Anderson films and about this one in particular is that it's not scared of, ending unsatisfyingly or having unsatisfying moments. It doesn't feel a need to resolve everything because in life not everything is resolved, especially when you're a kid. When you're a kid, nothing ever gets resolved because you have to grow up first.
Alpine Sudetenwalds and had taken up rooms in the Grand Budapest.
The Grand Budapest Hotel is the first Wes Anderson film that he wrote on his own, essentially. Hugo Guinness has a story by credit, but I'm just going to tell you now, I don't know what that means. I don't know what story by means. Every Wes Anderson film has a credit that is like story by this person, and I don't know how much contribution is required to a story by credit. I suspect it's very different for each film. I think some films probably have a lot of influence from the story by credited person. I think some of them have very little. But for all intents and purposes, I'm going to treat this as if this is, Wes Anderson's own thing. This is the only Wes Anderson film that was ever nominated for Best Picture. And it's one of the only ones that was nominated for really any Oscars. He has very little mainstream success, other than with this movie. Everyone saw this film. This is the first film everyone associates with Wes Anderson. It's also like his, first or second highest rated film on most review sites. People love it. People think this film is great, and it's the best thing he's ever done, and it's the only thing he's ever done. No, actually that's not true. People think this is the best thing he's ever done, and they think everything else he's done is bad. That's the average Wes Anderson take, I believe. This is obviously like an incredibly made film. I mean, the sets, the prop design, the costumes. It's incredibly impressive. Like, you have to watch this film and think, this looks crazy good, and 5 million to everyone who made it. I don't love the movie. There's this big, Baby Pink Hotel, and it doesn't grab me immediately. I think this is the thing about Wes Anderson, and it's why he's such a good director, but it's why he's sort of controversial in a way, or a bit love-hate, is that he makes aesthetic appeal a huge part of the enjoyment of his movies. And that doesn't mean that he lacks good writing. He has films that are not very well written, and he has films that are excellently written. And the ones that are excellently written are obviously better, but they have the same, the aesthetic appeal is a foundational element of enjoying the film. And so if you don't like the aesthetic, you're lost. I like the story. It's obviously that kind of again, it's a lot of stories within stories. It's about artists, and it's about oppressed groups. It's about coming together, and it's about the kind of melancholy nature of a big empty hotel, and I love that. I love abandoned buildings. There's something about this it's never reached me on a soulful level. The main character, I don't love him. There's just small parts that I don't love. And so it all comes together into a film that I admire greatly, that I'm sure is some of his best work, that I've never completely enjoyed. The thing is that I don't need to like The Grand Budapest Hotel, and I feel no need to, because it's the only one that anyone likes. This is the Wes Anderson film that has stood the test of time and will continue to be considered, his best and most important work. So I, the Wes Anderson defender, don't need to like it. I actually do like it. I like it, but I don't love it, I think is my thing. I like it intellectually, and I don't love it emotionally. But you've seen it. It's the one we've all seen, and everyone thinks is really good. So I'm clearly wrong. I know I'm wrong. But that doesn't mean I will change my mind. Isle of Dogs has a story by credit given to Roman Coppola, Jason Schwartzman, and Kenichi Nomura. So they did the story. This is obviously Wes Anderson's second stop-motion film, but it feels much more like a kid's movie than Fantastic Mr. Fox does. The plot is basically like dogs are exiled, and then this boy and some dogs need to prove that dogs are sick, and then the dogs come back. It doesn't have sort of the powerful lack of resolution that Fantastic Mr. Fox has. They're both about oppressed groups. They're both about animals sort of standing in for oppressed groups. But the dog thing feels extremely dog-centric in the way that it's difficult to sort of read it as anything other than what it is. It feels like its metaphor is much less applicable and so kind of a lot less interesting. There's also, I think, in terms of the issue that Wes Anderson seems to have with sort of depicting foreign people is much more present in this movie. The kind of controversial thing with this film is that there's a disclaimer at the start saying, like, the dog's all been translated into English. The humans all speak their native language. But effectively what this means is that we have the dogs who, an English-speaking audience, which is where the film was produced and largely distributed, can understand the dogs, and they can understand the one American character, and they can't understand any of the Japanese people. And it's a film set in Japan. So it's not great that we can't understand the Japanese people. And I think it does feel very orientalizing. I guess the intention is to make us empathize with the dogs more than the humans, but because there are humans who speak American, it just feels like it's a film about... It just feels like Japanese people are the only people denied language in this movie, or at least language that can be understood by the majority of the people watching it. I guess I just think there isn't much to Isle of Dogs. There's not a lot you can say about it, even. It's a nice looking film, the animation is really good, and there's a really beautiful sequence set to the song I Won't Hurt You by West Coast Pop Art Experimental Band. That can't be what they're called. West Coast Pop Art Experimental Band have a song called I Won't Hurt You, and it plays in this movie, and it's the only sequence in this film that makes me feel something real and deep, and I like that scene a lot, and that feels like the best part of the film for me. And then it sort of just meanders on, and it ends sort of happily. It doesn't feel like there's much challenge to get over in the film. It doesn't feel like there's much intrigue to get into. It's a pretty bland film. It's a fine watch, but you forget a lot of it almost as soon as it's over. This was critically fine received, actually. The critics didn't mind this one. I think because it's inoffensive, other than the part that's offensive. The film is inoffensive. There's nothing that would disturb. Even though art is supposed to comfort the disturbed and disturb the comforted. But there's nothing to disturb. The comforted are fine. The comforted are fine, and the disturbed are, like, boring. And that's the problem with Isle of Dogs. The French Dispatch has story by credits for Roman Coppola, Jason Schwartzman, and Hugo Guinness, given the fact that I was gonna call it a triptych, but there's actually 4 short stories in this film. I don't know if we should assume they did, like, one each, or they all helped on all of them. The French Dispatch, simply put, isn't very good. It's not very interesting, I guess, is the fundamental flaw of the whole thing. It's 4 short stories, and I feel like Wes Anderson films don't work as short stories. It works for this kind of era where he's more interested in... I don't want to say he's more interested in visuals than he is in story, because I will go against that later. I think this film specifically is what everyone criticizes Wes Anderson for being. Like, this is the film where the stories actually aren't that interesting, and where it is just about doing something kind of quirky and thinking like, oh, and isn't that intriguing? But I think his shorts, he struggles to sort of fit a vast emotional concept into a short film. And I think a lot of his shorts are worse for it. But you know, that you could say that's an issue with short films, but I don't think it has to be the case with short films. I think a lot of short films manage to actually do a lot in a short amount of time. Sissa with Quay was a short film I saw recently that it was really good, that I've had a real sense of depth despite being, I think it's like 15 minutes or something. Matt Johnson has a lot of short films that I think are good, that I think sort of manage to get at something. Yeah, they don't have to be bad is what I'm saying, I guess. The short films can be really good. They can be as good as full movies. Not Wes Anderson's, though. I don't think he's very good at the short film. I think his movies need time and space to be quiet and to feel kind of slow. And a short film always feels kind of fast. So it's difficult to make it a slow, meandering sort of character piece. But anyway, what I'm basically saying is that I have nothing to say about The French Dispatch. You know, it's a boring film. I don't like it. I didn't really enjoy my time watching it. I remember very little of what happened in it, despite having seen it recently. So I don't have anything to say. It's an uninteresting movie that's well made, but has no real substance to offer, as far as I'm concerned. I've already made like a 15-minute video about Asteroid City, talking about like what I think the themes are and how I would interpret, you know, the why I think the movie is his best film ever made, is one of the best films ever made. So I don't want to talk about this for ages. I mean, you can watch that video. This is a story by Roman Coppola. He did the story. The film was essentially written for Jason Schwartzman in kind of the script books. There's a lot of Wes Anderson wanted to write a film for Jason Schwartzman to be the star of again. So it's not a collaboration with Jason Schwartzman in terms of the writing, but it kind of emotionally is a collaboration with Jason Schwartzman. This is certainly his most meta film. It's like a radio broadcast of a fictional play depicting the story of a playwright making a play called Asteroid City, which is the film. And there's kind of stories in each layer, which is the good. I think in this, Wes Anderson really learns how to use those metatextual layers to build a bigger thing, because a lot of the story sort of takes place across different sections. Like, I think the real emotional core of the film, what a lot of my videos about, is Jason Schwartzman's, the actor playing his character, Jones Hall, had this relationship with the playwright Conrad Earp, played by Edward Norton. And once you kind of unpack the layers that's in and kind of piece that story together, the film really opens up as like a much bigger, grander, more beautiful thing. Like, it feels like a lot of levels of relationships, and it's about love, and it's about losing the people you love and how you're supposed to deal with that. Every Wes Anderson film is about grieving someone, essentially. That's his big thing. He loves to talk about grief. It has the same kind of thing as Steve Zissou, where there's this alien in the movie who is, you know, like the jaguar shark, like a representative, sort of metaphorical interpretation of death and of the randomness of death. You know, this alien comes through and he's just like, what do they call it? What do they call it in the movie? He's categorizing. No, it's not categorizing, though. He leaves an asteroid, and they have to all go into quarantine, and then he comes back, and he's just like, just written like a storage note on the asteroid that he's left. And it's a random event, and it ruins everyone's life for a while, and no one knows what to do about it, but people just kind of do know what to do about it. You know, they make art about it, they fall in love about it, they live about it. It's about the different ways you react to death and to randomness, and I think having the different layers adds a whole beautiful element to that. I mean, it's like he's just bringing in everything from his career into this beautiful thing. It kind of has a narrator like in Moonrise Kingdom, and it has this whole, meta-textual filmmaking plot like in Steve Zissou, and it has a story within a story like Rushmore, and like, why can't I name any of these films right now? I'm taking 5 minutes to come up with the name of every film as I list them. Darjeeling Limited. Feels like this is, to me, completely his magnum opus. This feels like the grand collection of everything he would do. And it does have those very elaborate sets. But it also has these black and white sections that are sort of less... I guess the sets work really in this one because it's sort of about plays. Sort of like the sets exist kind of within the world of the movie. I find it all fascinating. I mean, I could talk about the film for hours, and I won't because I've already talked about it for 15 minutes and now a bunch more minutes. But it really is a powerful movie. It was very badly received. This got terrible reviews, didn't do well critically, didn't even do well with audiences. People really hated this film. And I kind of see that because I think it's maybe a bit daunting as a text. I think a lot of the density, you have to watch the film a couple of times and really sort of sit down and spend time with it to get it. But you need to give films your time. You need to be willing to sit down with the film and talk with it as a piece of art. And I think a lot of people are less willing to do that now, perhaps, than they were previously. And I think this is part of kind of the downfall of Wes Anderson. People, say he fell off. And he did in many respects. When he starts writing by himself, his films, there's a bit of a foot-finding period. But I think this will be reappraised massively in the coming years. I can see Asteroid City becoming known as almost like a cult classic, like a film that people were not on board with, that they should have been. But I'll have been there from the beginning, because I liked it the first time.
Well, it's important. Before I start, I like to make sure I have everything around with it.
Going back to some shorts again, and going back to, our good old friend Roald Dahl. He's not my good old friend. He might be yours. We have The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and 3 other stories. These don't have a story by credit or a co-writing credit, because they were written by Roald Dahl. These films they're films. They're certainly films. They're visual media with a story, but they are essentially interpretive audiobooks, more so than they are the work of Wes Anderson. So, thematically, there's not a lot to say about them. There are 3. It's 4. Why does he always do 4 stories? Most people would do 3. The interesting thing about these films, outside of their content, is that they're kind of fictionally archived recordings from an old British TV channel that never really existed, and they're all filmed kind of like their live theatre performances. Like, all the sets are moved and things, and it's all like little puppets and stuff. And there's all of the stories have a narrator who's one of the characters who'll say, and then he says the thing that he's saying to the character. And then he said, and then the other guy says the thing. And that's sort of the style. And it's kind of fun. It's kind of a fun style in terms of like a sort of metatextual thing. And it does feel like, because then you get in the sort of the prose of the book, which is good, because you're bringing in more elements. And I don't like Roald Dahl, so I don't love them. But that's not Wes Anderson's fault. It's his fault for making them. I think in terms of the 4 films, Poison, I think, is certainly the strongest. I mean, Dev Patel is an incredible actor. And I think Poison is the only one that feels like it has something truly interesting or thorny to say. It's this film about kind of racism and colonialization, and these irrational kind of fears and beliefs that people hold, and that they make the problem of you know, an oppressed class. In this case, Indian people. Is it the film set in India? Dev Patel is Indian. It's a good film, and he brings out like a shaky cam kind of style, and it's just fun. It's interesting is the thing, is that it's saying something. You know, it's a Dev Patel and Ben Kingsley are trying to look after this guy who thinks he has a snake on him. They're doing everything to help him, and he's basically just being a huge dick. This you know, this white guy, Benedict Cumberbatch. And I don't like Benedict Cumberbatch, so I'm also happy that he's sort of an evil guy in this movie. And they do everything to help him, and then in the end, there was no snake. In the end, he was scared of literally nothing, and the film ends with this incredible kind of moment where Ben Kingsley and Dev Patel just look at each other and just kind of have to be like, well, them's the breaks. And I like it. It feels like it does manage to have this kind of quiet, introspective moment, despite it being, you know, a short film, which I just said earlier, or it's harder to do that with. But he does that with this one specifically. The other one's less so, but that's why I like Poison more than those ones, because it's about something. And I think, you know, as much as these maybe aren't some of my favorite of his work, I think they do prove an ability to adapt and to change and to make new things from Wes Anderson. A lot of people accuse him of being stale or just doing the same thing over and over, and this is a very different thing, you know, and he brings in a lot of different filmmaking styles and kind of interesting elements that I really like. And I think I like this era with kind of Asteroid City and these shorts where he's really into like theater aesthetic and the kind of idea of sets and things being moved around on screen that we can see. I would like him to do more of that if he wants to. Or if he doesn't want to, I would like to see the film he makes. What is this one for them, you know? Should we find out? Perhaps no. That's everything I have to say on these ones. You can watch them easily. They're short films. You can always watch just a bunch of short films, and then you can have like 500 on Letterboxd, and no one can tell you it's fake, because you did watch all those films, so... So The Phoenician Scheme is obviously Wes Anderson's most recent film. The acoustics in this section are going to be crazy. Another story by Roman Coppola. He did the story. He came up with the story. There was a kind of notable thing at the beginning of the press cycle for The Phoenician Scheme where everyone was talking about the fact that Michael Cera was in it. It was like a big deal that, you know, oh, Michael Cera is going to be in a Wes Anderson movie. Isn't that exciting? People seem to think like, oh, he's going to be really good. He's going to be really good at the Wes Anderson style. Which I find interesting because I think people talk about like the Wes Anderson style a lot in terms of actors, and it's... Michael Cera actually does fit the bill, but I don't think for the reasons that people think. I think Wes Anderson does really well with people like Ben Stiller and Owen Wilson and Bill Murray. Like, he's great with comedic actors from kind of like irreverent comedies. And that's why Michael Cera works so well, you know, because he's like, he was a super bad guy. But so this is why I think Seth Rogen. Wes Anderson should write a film with Judd Apatow. That's my real belief. It might be bad, but I would like to see it. But I think a lot of people just see Michael Cera as like a quirky kind of guy, and that's why he fits with the vibe. But it's because he's like, you know, an old comedy. And he is good in the movie, to be clear. I like him in The Phoenician Scheme. He's playing an interesting role. He's playing sort of two roles, because he's one guy and then he's revealed to be a different guy all along. The Phoenician Scheme is about death in maybe a slightly different way than some other Wes Anderson movies. It's kind of closest to Steve Zissou, and then it's about sort of dealing with your own death and your own legacy in a big way. It feels evocative of the quote, and I forget who said it, and it was maybe... I'll find out, but an older director who said, towards the end of his life, he said, well, there's just no time anymore. I'm annoyed now that I'm so old, because now I I have all of this knowledge, and I have all these films I want to make, but I don't have any time. It feels like that. It's kind of an action adventure film, but it's slow. It's slow paced. It's It's very, I mean, it's existential as they all are. And it feels like a very sort of gentle movie, despite the kind of action-adventure vibes. It feels like a warm bath. I don't know if this film stuck with me. I don't think the emotional core of it got to me the way something like Darjeeling did. Like, really, his early work has trends to a more emotional resonance. But this is certainly a better film, I think, than like Fresh Dispatch or Isle of Dogs. We're on a better trajectory. We had like flop film, masterpiece. Pretty good movie. The best Wes Anderson films feel sort of grand and incredible. And this one feels like a beautiful film to watch on a Sunday afternoon. But he can be doing, like, Asteroid City feels powerful and big. And this feels quaint and nice. And I like that about it. And I think aesthetically, this is much more interesting to me than The French Dispatch, which felt like it was just almost like fondant. And this feels like nice, plain Victoria sponge. Just like a nice slice of Victoria sponge. There's not a lot of ingredients, but it's just nice. It's just a solid film. Overall, I think basically the biggest change in how Wes Anderson makes his films is that he's stopped being such a collaborator. And I think a lot of where he really shines are in these collaborations, you know, his films with Noah Baumbach, the films he wrote with Roman Coppola, with Jason Schwartzman, with Owen Wilson, you know, his first writing partner, are his most special movies. Asteroid City, I think, is sort of an outlier in that regard. It's maybe kind of the exception that proves the rule. But it's also essentially a collaborative project, you know. It's a film that's written for Jason Schwartzman. So it's kind of catering to a taste other than Wes Anderson's own. There is something, and I think any decent filmmaker would tell you that things tend to get better under more constraints. If you have someone that you have to argue with, you have to compromise, you have to come to some conclusion with, I think that generally makes a better product than if you're just making every decision on any creative work. So in that way, you know, Wes Anderson was good when he was collaborating with people, and he's not so good when he writes by himself. Though, of course, the mass popularity of the Grand Budapest Hotel would tell me otherwise. But I think most people just haven't seen more Wes Anderson films than that. I think if you showed the average person like Tenenbaums or Darjeeling, or even The Life Aquatic, I mean, that one flopped hugely, but I think if we sat down and made people watch them, maybe they come out with a different perspective. Or not, I don't know. I mean, I'm not other people. Wes Anderson's next film he's set to co-write with Richard Ayoade, which I worry won't go so well, because I think they might have two similar styles. If you watch the film Submarine, that was Richard Ayoade's debut, it's clearly very Wes Anderson inspired in, I think, a really good way, and I think that the writing's really strong, but I worry that together they'll just make something that is too much that thing and doesn't have enough outside influence. When really, I think his best co-writing projects are when he gets someone who brings something of their own style to the project. And this is why I'll once again pitch you Wes Anderson, Judd Apatow. And if it's bad, then I'm sorry, but I think it'll be good. I'm actually confident it'll be good. You can't tell me otherwise. It'll probably be good if they write a film together. So if you know these people, get them on the phone. If you don't, just like the video. Maybe subscribe to me. Maybe comment if you have the number of someone who you think knows these people, and I can text them and I can say, hey, we should be arranging this. Obviously, it would be a good idea. But you can do all of that stuff. I have other videos you could watch. You could watch it. I did my Asteroid City video. You could watch. It's that could be interesting for you. And yeah, basically just keep joy and whimsy and love in your heart. And I think every Wes Anderson movie is fundamentally watchable. I failed him by not liking some of his films, and I will admit that.